Well, hello everyone again, and this is Dr. David, and I'm here with Dr. Lundell, who will be talking about, well, a very, very interesting topic, the one that concerns most of us, weight loss, but a unique approach to weight loss, and really one that targets the problem, probably better than anything else out there. So I'm really, really looking forward to this. I'm going to just show a few slides. Folks, please remember, this is not meant to be, whatever information is going to be shared tonight is not meant to be a substitute for your doctor's expert attention and care. Please check with your doctor, especially if you are on any long-term medical treatment. Check with your physician, your healthcare provider before you make any changes, any drastic changes. Again, this is not meant to be a treatment or a cure. This is meant to help you take charge of your health. And there are two different things. Your health is one thing, your disease ailment could be another thing entirely. And before I introduce Dr. Lundell, I just want to read out this quote. I just think this is such an apt quote, especially when we're talking about nutrition. And so here goes. As knowledge with regard to the effects of food upon man increases, it is more than conceivable that the races that first avail themselves of the new values of nutrition may decrease the handicaps of disease, lengthen their lives, and so become the leaders of the future. By Victor B. Heiser. Like I said earlier, especially when it comes to nutrition and the way it affects our bodies. And it's interesting. Tonight's topic is about weight and obviously food. And really the cause of excess weight has a lot to do with what we put in our mouths. But the good thing about it is that the cause, the problem, is the same source as the solution. The same thing that causes the problem is the same thing that will bring us salvation, so to speak. But it's the right kind of food, the right kind of nutrition, and that's why I think this quote here is very apt. All right, I'm going to just say a few things about Dr. Lundell. Obviously, this can't cover anything anywhere close to what this man has achieved and his standing in society, and it's, again, an honor to have him. Dr. Lundell's experience in cardiovascular and thoracic surgery over the last 25 years includes having performed over 5,000 coronary bypass surgeries, certification by the American Board of Surgery, the American Board of Thoracic Surgery, and the Society of Thoracic Surgeons. Dr. Lundell was a pioneer in the off-pump heart surgery, which reduced surgical complications and recovery times. He is in the Beating Heart Hall of Fame and has been listed in Phoenix Magazine's top doctors for 10 years and above. A recognized leader in his field, he has consulted and advised for a variety of leading medical device manufacturers such as Cardiothoracic Systems, Inc., before and after his acquisition by Guidant Corporation. As you can see in front of you, he is an avid athlete and he competes regularly in the Ironman competitions. He is a 2008 Ironman Arizona champion in the 65 to 69 age group and was 10th in the Ironman World Championships in Kona, Hawaii. And Dr. Lundell has pretty much devoted his life to teaching and educating people on health, especially when it comes to cardiovascular health. And of course, weight loss is an integral part of attaining your health. And so without much ado, I'm first of all going to hand over to him. Let's see if I can get that right. Yes, indeed. Dr. Lundell, thank you so much for all you do and for also for making the time to present to our viewers tonight.
You are very welcome.
I think
you got the screen now?
Absolutely. We see it up. Looks good.
You got the screen now and the audio is good?
Yes, sir. Audio is good. We see the screen. All that's left is for you to make it a full screen slide.
I'll do that. We good now?
Yes, sir. You're white and dead.
Oh, wonderful. Pure white and deadly. Well, what is that? As you saw from the picture, it might be me with my white hair, but I'm not so pure, so it can't be me. I guess it could have been Ku Klux Klan in Alabama 50 years ago, but it's not that. It's something else. And that's what we want to talk about. And I just wanted to have a little provocative title here. Actually, it's the title of a book written in the 50s by a British scientist and physician called John Yudkin. And I like the title so much that I've kind of misappropriated it here. But basically, America's in trouble. You know, in the last 30 years, we've come from being one of the healthiest countries on earth to being one of the least healthy. And the trends continue to be awful. The world we're headed to leave our children looks kind of bleak. And the decline in our health and the rise of chronic diseases can be laid at the obesity crisis. Amazingly now, 70% of the country is overweight and a whopping 40% of us are obese. And this definitely leads to heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and many others. And basically, for 25 or 30 years, a little more, I spent my time looking inside of people's body, and for part of that time, without knowing really the consequences of nutrition that they were getting, and I was looking at the consequences of nutrition and thinking it was the consequences of something else. Now, the next slide, if I can get it, represents the worst of the obesity crisis. This poor woman is at the top end of being morbidly obese. The poor thing is sitting here in bed, unable to move or do much. She's undoubtedly got a big ulcer on the one knee. And just look at the tray in front of her. All the medications that go with us. And this slide is not meant to make fun of this poor woman, but this slide is to illustrate the absolute complete connection between obesity and chronic diseases, which require lots of medications. And it's spreading. More normal obese people are like these in this picture, a happy couple, but both overweight and not doing so well, really. And really, one of the scariest things about what's going on is the childhood obesity epidemic. Now, just go to your local high school or go to the local fast food outlet and look at the young people coming in there. And you can see that they're headed for a lot of trouble if we don't do something. The XXL generation, kind of sad. And you know, here's another sad picture. These kids, unless something changes, they don't have a chance. They're going to be unhappy, unfit, and sick, and die prematurely if we don't do something. Indeed, most people are fat, and this is not meant to be in a derogatory way, but just a fact of life, because indeed 70% of us are overweight and 40% are classified obese. Most people didn't want to get fat. I can't find one of them who really said, you know, I was trim, I was thin, I was athletic, and I really wanted to get fat. You never hear that. Most people really don't know why they got fat. As adults, we tend to gain somewhere between 1 pound and 5 pounds a year during our adult life in America, and we really don't know why. And most people don't know how unhealthy it is for us to be overweight, and for sure, most people don't know what to do about it. And unfortunately, my beloved medical profession, which I was part of and proud to be part of for my adult life, doesn't have the answer. This is the famous statue of David, revised to be a modern American David. And medicine's answer to this: if you don't move, you get fat. And the mantra from modern medicine is eat less, move more. But guess what? It's not working. And so instead of looking they've decided that's the cause. You're too lazy, you're a glutton, and you're lazy. And but we also try to blame technology. And this is kind of cute, but the TV got skinnier, but we got fatter, and so, as I say, the blame has always been placed on technology. They're blaming something, blaming this, blaming that, and blaming the other. And to me, blaming obesity on overeating is like blaming alcoholism on overdrinking. It just doesn't answer the problem. And we also decided we're going to blame animal fats. We're going to blame saturated fats. We're going to blame all sorts of fats. And so we blame the victim. We blame technology, and we blame fat. And so far, we don't have a solution. In the last 30 years, we put a man on the moon, computer on every desktop, a smartphone in every hand. We've made breakthroughs in virtually every other area of our life, in transportation, in commerce, in internet, all the rest, and yet we can't seem to solve this obesity crisis. And the two main reasons are we haven't identified properly the enemy. As I said, we call the enemy us, we call the enemy technology, we call the enemy fat. And so far, none of those are the real enemy. And the enemy is tough. Obviously, the enemy is winning in this case because so many of us are overweight. And the real enemy is sugar. In 1811, we consumed 20 pounds of sugar per person per year. In 1911, that was up to 90 pounds per person per year. And in 2011, we consumed 180 pounds of sugar per person per year. This trend in increasing sugar and simple carbohydrate consumption has been aggravated by the addition of animal fats, the additional vegetable oil. And you had Dr. Barry Sears on a while back, and he called it the perfect nutritional storm, the combination of too many calories and the addition of vegetable oils, and together they're responsible for this obesity crisis and the crisis in diabetes. Now here's the real enemy. The government recommendations that we should eat, and guess what? We've followed these instructions. We've reduced our consumption of fats. We've reduced our consumption of cholesterol. We've reduced our consumption of animal fats. And we followed this instruction to eat grains and whole grains and more grains and pastas and bread. And the result of this food pyramid is our obesity crisis. This is the recommended diet. I mean, we all love a little bread, and Grandma used to make homemade bread, and my cousins and brothers and I would have knockdown, drag-out brawls to get Grandma's homemade bread. And another huge source of sugar in our diet is the Coca-Cola, and or not just Coca-Cola, all sweetened soft drinks. When I speak, I ask mothers in the audience if any of them would sit down and let their child eat 9 teaspoons of sugar out of the sugar bowl. And they all say in horror, no, they would never do such a thing. And then I ask, which one of you let your child have a soda pop? And then they know they're guilty of having their child eat huge amounts of excess sugar. In addition to the obesity crisis, we have a huge amount of diabetes in this country. We have 20 million people, 25 million people diagnosed with diabetes, type 2 diabetes. We have an astounding 80 million people that we know have prediabetes. And we'll come to a definition of that in a little bit. Diabetes is the leading cause of blindness, non-traumatic amputations, renal failure, and nerve damage. And it costs society both in direct medical costs, which are about $115 billion, and then the other $50 billion is in indirect costs, meaning lost work, disability, and all those kind of things. So it's a massive economic problem, and it's getting worse. More and more people are diagnosed every day with type 2 diabetes and with prediabetes. Now let's do a little fun math problem, if any math problem is fun. We have about 5 liters of blood in a typical adult. That is 50 deciliters, because a deciliter is 1/10 of a liter. Now, blood sugar at 100 milligrams per deciliter is the upper limit of normal. If you go over that, you're considered to have prediabetes. And if you're below that, you're okay. This is a fasting blood sugar. So if we take the 50 deciliters and multiply it by 100 milligrams, that gives us 500 milligrams of sugar to bring us to the upper limit of normal. 5 grams of sugar is 5,000 milligrams is 5 grams, which is 1 teaspoon. 1 teaspoon of sugar dissolved in your blood will bring you up to the upper limit of normal of blood sugar. 1 order of medium French fries has 47 grams of sugar, almost 10 times the amount you need to be normal. Now, this is a little bit of an exaggeration, if you will, because we know that 1 order of French fries won't send you up to 1,000 blood sugar under normal circumstances. So, but it points out how hard our metabolism, how hard our body has to work to try to dispose of this much sugar. And let's suppose you have those fries and a milkshake and a hamburger bun and top it off with an apple turnover. You know, it's a huge amount of sugar, and it's our metabolism has got to handle it in one way or another, because the body tries to control the blood sugar at a very narrow range, like everything else. Your temperature is controlled at a very narrow range. You get symptomatic if you're too high or too low. Our oxygen levels, our pH levels, our electrolyte levels are all controlled in a very narrow range. And the normal blood sugar tends to be somewhere between 70 and 100. And these curves are for what's called a glucose tolerance test. We give someone 50 grams of sugar, 50 grams of glucose, and then check their blood sugar over time. And normally we would go from like 70 to 120 or so. This chart says 150. And then by 2 hours, 3 hours, we'd be back to the normal range, because insulin has taken that blood sugar and pumped it into the cells, a variety of cells, and brought our blood sugar back down to normal. Now, the top curve is a person who's diabetic. Number one, they start high with a fasting blood sugar of greater than 100, which we talked about. And the same amount of sugar will send their blood sugar up to, or blood glucose up to over 250, and it will take a much longer time to come down. And this is important because once we get over about 140, and this is not well known and not talked about very often, we begin to get damage to a variety of tissues, mostly mediated by oxidative stress. And the other important thing is that insulin is the master fat-storing hormone. And when we have these high sugars, we have high insulin levels, and it promotes fat storage. And the other important thing is that when we have high spikes in sugar like this, we develop cravings. It makes a change in our brain, the pleasure centers, the dopamine, the serotonin, and possibly some actual structural changes in the limbic system cause us to crave carbohydrates. And we do it all the time. Now, once again, I'm a little ashamed of my profession, because we don't treat diabetics very effectively. We don't diagnose them early enough, and we wait until they're symptomatic, wait till they have early diabetes. And the sad thing is, by the time you get diagnosed with diabetes, almost 60% of your pancreas, the insulin-producing cells, are gone. And when we have continued high spikes, we have continued damage to that pancreas, and this is why diabetics tend to get steadily, steadily worse, no matter what medical treatment we give them. This chart actually is a little bit old. Normal blood sugar would be below 100 now, and pre-diabetic over 100 to 125, and diabetic if your fasting blood sugar is over 120. And the glucose tolerance test is still the same, 140 after a glucose load, and a pre-diabetic might go up to 200. And remember, tissue damage and harm to the cells occurs at 150, 140, and then if we go over that, we're considered diabetic. Diabetes causes, as we mentioned, damage to the eyes, damage to the kidneys, damage to the nerves, pancreas, and to the endothelial cells, which are the lining cells of our blood vessels throughout our body. And why is that? Why is that? Because there are certain cells that don't need insulin to take in sugar. And these are some cells in the retina of the eye, in the kidney, the lining cells of our blood vessels, the cells of the pancreas, and some nerve cells. And because they don't need insulin to take in sugar, they're really at the mercy of the blood sugar. And so the sugar levels inside the cell are the same as those out in the blood, and they get overloaded. This is like pouring gas on a fire, and it creates oxidative stress and ultimately can lead to cell death. And this is why diabetics have the particular set of complications of blindness, of kidney failure, of neuropathies, and small vessel disease and leg amputations. And the mechanism, as I mentioned, is thought to be oxidative stress. We just overload the cells with glucose, creates free radicals inside the cell, and causes the endothelial dysfunction, as this slide. Now, endothelium, what in the world is that, and why is it important, and who cares? Endothelium is the very fine little single cell layer thick lining of our blood vessels. And really, these cells are the brains of the cardiovascular system. These cells are the ones that can signal the blood vessels to dilate or contract. They control blood flow. And if you stop and think about it, everything that gets into our cells, every food, everything has to pass through, excuse me, everything has to pass through this layer, and we don't think about it, but if we get nutrients into our cell, they have to go through the endothelium to get out to the cell in the capillaries. So that's why this layer is so critical, and that's why when these cells are at the mercy of the blood sugar, and when we overload our system with sugar, those cells die, and we have what's called endothelial dysfunction. That means the blood vessels don't let the right kind of things through, they don't dilate, and endothelial dysfunction means the initials are ED. Now I know all the commercials on television for ED represent something else called erectile dysfunction, but as a matter of fact, they're exactly the same thing. Erectile dysfunction is a result of endothelial dysfunction. If those people had healthy blood vessels, they wouldn't have that condition. Now let's talk about what happens when we eat sugars and starches. That delicious slice of bread gets broken down into pure 100% glucose. The table sugar that we have, or the sugar that's in our soft drinks, is about half glucose and half fructose. So it might not raise our sugar quite as much as the slice of bread, but because the fructose is processed a little different and is a special circumstance, which is a subject of another lecture. But at any rate, they all get absorbed, broken down, digested relatively quickly, depending on the complexity of the carbohydrate. But basically, they're broken down quickly and absorbed into the bloodstream. And then in the bloodstream, something has to be done. The sugar's either sent to the liver under the control of insulin, or insulin sends it to muscles, and insulin sends it to fat. And our short-term energy storage in the liver is called glycogen. And we store about 2,000 calories of energy in our liver and in our muscles. Now, the glycogen in the liver can get converted into blood sugar. The glycogen in the muscle cells can be converted for use, but it can't be put back into the bloodstream. So once the glycogen stores are full, where does the glucose go? It's got to go into the fat cells. There's no other place for it to go. And that makes insulin the master fat-storing hormone. Now, here's the history of type 2 diabetes. We come up here and we have lots of insulin, but our response to insulin goes down. That's called insulin resistance and is one of the things that makes up the metabolic syndrome. And then slowly, as the pancreas gets more and more injured, the insulin levels fall, and as they fall, the blood glucose levels continue to rise, and both the fasting blood glucose and the postprandial, or the after meal glucose, begins to rise in the same way. Now, our friends at the American Diabetes Association, here's some quotes from them. Your digestive system turns carbohydrates into sugar quickly and easily. Carbohydrate is the food that most influences blood glucose levels. The more carbs you eat, the higher your blood glucose goes. And the higher your blood glucose, the more insulin you need to move the sugar into your cells. The food pyramid is an easy way to remember the healthiest way to eat. The food you need is at the bottom. At the bottom of the pyramid are bread, cereal, rice, pasta. These foods contain mostly carbohydrates. You need 6 to 8 servings of these foods per day. Now, diabetes is a disorder of carbohydrate intolerance. And yet, the ADA says give them carbohydrates. If you were gluten intolerant, no one would say eat gluten. And yet, when we have a disease of carbohydrate intolerance, medicine and the American Diabetes Association says give them lots of carbohydrates. I don't get it. I don't get it. Now, here's the big problem. Big food spends billions of dollars producing and promoting the highly processed carbohydrates. Sugar, flour, non-fat snacks of all variety, non-fat everything of all varieties, and they are virtually addicted. And all of us have stood staring into the fridge or staring into the pantry or going to the local coffee shop to get a sweet roll, the bread at a restaurant, donuts at work, the sweets that are brought into work all the time. We just can't resist them because we're addicted to sugar. And as I looked at these big problems, and I looked at what to do about it, and I looked at how hard it is for people to overcome the urge, the craving, the addiction to carbohydrates, I decided that we really needed to do, I needed to do something different to help people overcome this problem. And that's when we developed a product called Real Weight. Now, let's go back to these blood sugar curves. A normal blood sugar after a glucose load will come up here between 120 and still be normal. Over 2 hours, it's back to normal. The non-insulin dependent diabetic is up here, 200, above 200. And it's interesting, if our blood sugars get too low, maybe below about 50, we faint, we get shaky, we get weak. But we really don't get symptomatic until they get up around 400 or 500 levels. I've seen people at least that high in the hospital after operations and no symptoms whatsoever. And quite obviously, one sweet roll isn't going to kill you. But and one carbohydrate meal isn't going to kill us. We know that. It would be silly for me to say otherwise. But 1,000 meals or 2,000 meals like that is the damage is accumulating and continues to harm us. So if these sugar spikes cause damage, cause chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and if these spikes cause us to be addicted to sugar, then the key would be to stop these big spikes in blood sugar. Now, as I said, insulin is the master fat-storing hormone. If we eat glucose, we produce insulin. Insulin pushes the glucose into the cells. There are three choices when we have glucose. We can burn it, we can store it as glycogen, which I mentioned, or we can store it as fat. And that makes insulin the fat-storing hormone. Insulin promotes fat storage, and insulin stops the breakdown of fat so it can be used as energy. So if we have high insulin levels, no matter what, we can't break down fat, and this is one of the things that makes us hungry again, because we're basically starving the other cells because they can't get enough energy from the breaking down fat. The fat cell is a fascinating, interesting cell. There's no other cell in the body that can go from small like this to monstrous like this and still have normal, relatively normal functions. It can expand and contract in size, and no other cell really does this to this degree and remains relatively normal. And yet, when our fat cells get big enough, they begin to die, they begin to rupture, and they begin to produce all sorts of cytokines that promote chronic inflammation. So obesity leads to inflammation, and inflammation leads to obesity because it blocks some of the normal feedback mechanisms by the chronic inflammation mechanism. So it becomes a very vicious cycle of inflammation and obesity, and some have called it inflabesity, combining the two words. So how do we stop these sugar spikes? How do we help people overcome their addiction? When we put real weight together, we put in two key ingredients, a raw coffee extract and an organic specific seaweed extract, both of which are designed to stop those big spikes in blood sugar. They both independently proven in clinical studies to do this, and for the first time ever, these ingredients are now combined in real weight. And let's go back to blood sugar curves again. And normal blood sugar is in the blue. After a meal, might go to 120. The typical American, eating a typical American diet is in the pink. And once again, when they give it above the 140, we're in the area where we begin to, well, all this area above 120 is fat storing. Above 140, we begin to get tissue damage and we begin to get cravings. And the pre-diabetic might go up to 180 or even 200. And once again, the area under the curve, as you can see, is that much bigger, that much longer. So we have fat storage, we have cravings, and we have weight gain for a longer duration of the cycle after each meal. If we use real weight, which is taken 2 tablets or 2 capsules before meals, about 15 to 30 minutes before the meals, once again, this is from the other chart, the typical American diet with sugar cravings, weight gain. And if we take real weight, we'll be, and don't watch our diet, we'll have a shorter spike. And if we watch our diet and if we succeed in resisting those carbohydrates, we'll have a curve that looks much more like this, much more normal. The real weight comes like this, and Dr. David, you can give them Mary Ann's number or website where they can get this, or you can go to asante.com. It's just now coming on the market. We've had a test group. We've had fantastic results with dramatic weight loss, and without coaching, without counseling, they've all told us that they have no more cravings. Now, I know, Dr. David, you had William Davis on, or is going to come on, and he said, what's the greatest, in one of his blogs, what's the greatest weight loss tool? Not a treadmill, not weights, not yoga, not a workout. The greatest tool to control your body weight is the blood glucose meter. And you can get one of these at the drugstore without a prescription. You can test your own sugars. And if you find yourself going above 120 after a meal, identify that food that made you go over 120 and eat less of it, or don't eat it anymore. He's on a big kick about wheat and how bad wheat is, and God bless him, and it might be accurate or it might be a little overstated, and I don't mind a little hyperbole every now and then, but I do agree with him. As you've seen from the rest of this presentation, it's those spikes, those high spikes after we eat, that cause us the health problems and cause us to gain weight and cause us to progress from normal to pre-diabetic to diabetic with all those consequences. And there it is, pure, white, and deadly. So, David, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very, very, very much, Doc. This is brilliant as always. And I really like the way you explained the whole sugar cascade, because a lot of people really don't get that. We're still all hung up with the whole fat debacle. That I mean, I still go to the stores, and it's the whole thing is low fat, no fat, this and that, and yet it's hard to imagine that intelligent people are still promoting that as a way to keep weight off. And I think it's unfortunate. But folks, just really quickly, I'm going to take the slides back for a second and then show Dr. Lundell's slides. And please type in your questions. For those of you not used to it, you can type it in the top right-hand section of your screen. And there should be a spot there where you can type in your questions. Okay, I think you can see my screen right now. Okay, for those of you just joining us, this has been a presentation by Dr. Lundell on the key to healthy, sustainable weight loss, and it's in a product that he has just developed called Real Weights. And as he mentioned, you can actually go to asante.com and purchase it. Now, folks, if you were invited here by a guest or by a distributor with Asante, please get back with the person who invited you. We're putting Marianne's slide up right now because she's the one who does all the work of helping us get Dr. Lundell and other wonderful speakers on. And so it just makes sense that she be credited for all of that. And she has been a really good friend and supporter of all that we do. So, and of those of you calling in over the phone, the number is 952-944-4066. 952-944-4066. And I think the questions are coming in. I just want to say really quickly, Dr. Lundell talked a lot about insulin, and Dr. Barry Sears has actually done a recent presentation, well, about a couple of months ago, on insulin resistance, and he really explains the whole underlying factor. And I mean, this is a really big field, really, and Dr. Lundell did an excellent job summarizing it. Now, Dr. Sears did a whole presentation on that, so of course, if you want to take advantage of that, it's on our site, and he agrees, everything he says pretty much agrees with what Dr. Lundell has spoken about. Okay, let's start with the questions. Okay, well, someone says, does this do anything to control your appetite? And I think you mentioned that, Doc, but could you explain that again?
Well, yes, we think that it does control the appetite. If you don't crave something, then you can control your consumption of it. So the idea behind controlling those sugar spikes is to stop us from being so compelled to go have a second helping, a second donut, a second sweet roll, a second bowl of cereal, whatever it might be. And so the answer is yes, it does help us control our appetite, but in a natural way by stopping the spikes in sugar.
That's great. Any possibility of side effects?
Well, there's always a possibility, but we've had a big test group here. We've been working on this for more than a year, and so far there are no side effects.
And this is something that we can use on a prolonged basis. Is this going to be like a normal supplement that everybody takes just to control the weight, whether or not they're dealing with excessive weight issues? Well,
yes, we think that because the advertising and the availability of carbohydrates is so overwhelming that, and some of our addictions are so deep-seated that I anticipate people will need this product as long as we have lots of excess carbs around, or until the rest of the medical profession comes around to the idea that it's not fat, that it's really carbs that make us fat and sick and diabetic. So what some people have done is once they reach their goal weight, they reduce it from 2 capsules to 1, and we have some people who are continuing to very slowly and in a very healthy way drop weight and or stabilize at the weight they want by reducing it to 1 capsule. So I personally think as long as we have our current environment, we're going to need to continue to take this.
That makes sense. Now, I found this hard to believe, but I understand that you had personal struggle with weight yourself, a certain amount, a certain number of pounds that you've been trying to get off, and to no avail until recently. Can you talk to us about that?
All right. Well, you see, you walk past the gym and you see people out jogging or in there sweating on the aerobic machines, and as you mentioned in the beginning, I fell in with a bad crowd and started competing in these Ironman competitions. And that requires training maybe 15 to 20 hours a week, depending on how close we are to an event. So I exercised like a madman for the last 4.5 years. My weight remained exactly stable, and until once I started the study group, I decided I'd be a little more faithful about taking my real weights, and I dropped 15 pounds without particularly changing anything. Just maybe I was able to resist the carbs. We get a lot of pressure and a lot of advertising to eat a lot of carbs when you exercise, but in fact, endurance exercise really depends on fat burning. So I probably was taking too many carbs during the activity or immediately after the activity. Would sometimes reward ourselves by going to the coffee shop and having a big a bagel or a maple oat nut scone was one of my favorites, but don't have that desire anymore, and so wonderfully 15 pounds has come off, and hopefully that'll make me a little faster.
When is your next competition?
Well, the next competition is the return to the World Championships in Kona in October the 8th, I believe.
Oh, really? And, around the corner?
Around the corner. We're starting to get nervous. It's obviously very exciting. It's the pinnacle of triathlon. It's the World Championship. People from all over the world who had to qualify by finishing in the top few in their age group from about 28 events around the world will be there. And when you go to the airport, Dr. David, you see lots of overweight people. Mm-hmm. But we got on the flight the last time we went to Kona, and I'll bet the airline saved thousands of gallons of fuel because it was all the I was the fattest one on the plane, and it was all the thin triathletes on the way to either be with their friends or compete in the event. It's kind of interesting.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Well, this is fascinating. I mean, this is well, obviously the fact that we're just talking about 2 ingredients here. That goes right against the grain for most of the weight loss supplements that are out there. But yes, you're using coffee beans, but you're not using caffeine. It's only the polyphenols. Is there any caffeine in this at all?
Well, there is. The raw coffee extract, it does not have caffeine in it. But we have added some caffeine, and most supplements do. We have the amount of caffeine in here is about the same as a small cup of coffee. I don't know if you look at the contents, but the average cup of coffee is somewhere between 100 and 150, and a grande Starbucks is 300 some odd. So there is a small dose of caffeine which we've added, but it's not excess amount, and it's an amount that that we think helps overcome these addictions.
Interesting. And folks, there are questions coming in and saying, okay, is there a website we can read up on this? I think Marianne has a couple of PDFs that she can send to you, so you can email or call her about it. But Doc, is there a website too that you can go to find out more?
Yes, there's realweightprelaunch.com or prelaunchrealweight.com. And that's both the symbol there and spelled out, real weight or real W8. Prelaunchrealweight.com or real weight prelaunch. They'll both work.
Got it. Great. Great. Shirley says, great presentation by Dr. Lundell, as always. My order is already in, and we are all very excited over this new weight product. The greatest thing to come along in my 75 years on this planet. How about
Great.
that? You go, Shirley. You go, girl. All right, someone wants to know what the cost is, and the same person, Susan, wants to know, is it just 2 ingredients? And of course, you talked about the coffee aspect. What's the other ingredient?
Well, there are more ingredients.
Okay.
Those are the 2 main ingredients that accomplish what I set out to do, stopping the sugar spikes. But there are some antioxidant vitamins and some B vitamins, and I think very, very important, there is vitamin D and calcium. And these have been shown, no matter what kind of weight loss program or supplement one might be on, or even medication for that matter, the calcium and vitamin D have been shown to assist in that in all weight loss programs. So we included those to help the other 2 main ingredients succeed.
So it's all a synergistic effect.
We think so.
Well, Susan's asking a lot of questions tonight. Where is the calcium from?
Where's the calcium from?
I guess he's wanting
the Earth.
Okay.
The periodic table. I don't mean to belittle the question, Susan. I'm sorry, but the calcium we get from it's forgotten the exact particular kind of calcium, which is probably what you're asking. I'm sorry.
I guess she's wanting to know. She just typed this, and is it plant-based? I guess plant-based would be a lot more expensive, really, to include in these formulations. Okay, Kathleen from Australia. Will you send? Do you ship to Australia now, or do we have to buy it and then help ship it to them?
I think we can ship to Australia for personal consumption. Yes.
Directly from Asante, the office.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So they're just the extra.
We've not shipped there before, and with another product we had a little bit of time was taken to get it through the customs and the health authorities in Australia, but that's not a problem. There's nothing in here that would raise concern.
Right. I think one of the problems they have is they want to discourage reselling, so there's a limit on the number of products you can buy for any specific person. But I'm sure the office should be able to take care of that. 3-month supply. Are you allowed to speak about costs? I mean, are you comfortable speaking about costs on the webinar, Doc?
Yeah, I didn't answer that question. 3 months is currently very limited offer, as you have on the slide, is $240. Otherwise, if you bought them one at a time, it would be $100 for a month's supply, 120 capsules.
Got it. So it's so that's 4 a day then? No, am I getting it right? Yeah, 4 a day.
4 a day.
2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon.
2 15 to 30 minutes before lunch, and 2 15 to 30 minutes before dinner, supper.
And the caffeine wouldn't get in the way for some people who are a little bit sensitive to that being sleeping?
We've had nobody say they couldn't sleep.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. That's very good to know. All right. Where can we see testimonials or results?
You can see those on the Real Weight pre-launch.com
Website.
or Real Weight pre-launch or pre-launch Real Weight.
Got it.
And Marianne can give you access to a Facebook page, which is a lot of fun. There's so much excitement when people begin to lose weight and get compliments from their friends, and so it's been absolutely exciting, this little study group that we've started, and the results are just fantastic.
I can imagine. I mean, there's nothing better than a natural way to lose weight and really see the results. That's just fantastic, Doc. Good job there. For those of you who are calling in, I'm just going to say out Marianne's phone number again. Remember, folks, we don't get anything for this. This is all going to Marianne, and obviously our goal is to present you with the best information possible on health and wellness. And it's part of our reward is just the fact that we can do just that. And obviously the part I enjoy is really being able to interact with such brains and accomplished people like Dr. Lundell. And again, it's an honor, as always, to have him on. Okay, Marianne's phone number is 952-944-4066. And her email address is realweightrevolution@gmail.com, and that's all spelled out. realweightrevolution@gmail.com. No numbers or anything. Okay, I think we've got most of the questions have been taken care of.
Your listeners could go back and Dr. Sears is his explanation of all this is probably, and I've watched most of that webinar, a little more complicated than mine, but it's also an excellent presentation which will reinforce what we've discussed tonight.
Right. Yeah, obviously he goes into a lot more academic detail than the lay
Yeah, because,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, insulin resistance is just, the cells are full. The sugar can't go anywhere, and so it's like the old story of calling wolf. Pretty soon the cells just ignore the insulin, and so his lecture here, this webinar, will be interesting for those that want to go in depth a little bit more.
I think it's just fascinating that by the time you get to be diabetic, you've already burnt out 60% of your pancreas.
Well, the interesting thing to me is that if we reduce our carbohydrates enough, we actually can reverse this trend that we talked about of getting uncontrollably worse and worse and worse as time goes on. And there's some interesting experience. If we stop killing our pancreatic cells with these high spikes of sugar, there are some people who have prediabetes or even early type 2 that'll get recovery. And, you know, before we discovered insulin, and we treated diabetics by giving them a reduced carbohydrate diet. Oh my goodness.
Well, it still baffles me, Doc, that how can the smart people still hold on to this belief that fat is the problem in the light of this overwhelming evidence? I mean, what is it that surely there has to be a reason behind all this. It doesn't make sense to me, but there could be a reason. You know what it is?
Oh, I think it's the official established religion of low fat. And because it is the official established religion, none dare speak against it. I mean, if you're a university person, you survive on grants and you survive on quote-unquote peer-reviewed literature. And we always think, peer-reviewed literature is some great thing, but it depends on who your peers are. If I'm a member of the Taliban and write an article that, or Al-Qaeda and write an article that I hate Americans and have it reviewed by my peers in Al-Qaeda, guess what? I'm going to get a peer-reviewed article talking about how bad Americans are. So it depends on, and that's an extreme example, but the peers are all under the same pressure to follow the official orthodox teaching that it's all about saturated fat, it's all about cholesterol, and the other thing is that it's really not the healthcare industry, it's a sick care industry. And very, very few people have economic benefit from preventing illnesses. Most of the time, hospitals, physicians, drug companies, insurance companies gain benefit by treating sick people. So if you become a diabetic, you have just become an annuity for somebody.
That is so sad, even though it's crippling the economy. All right. Okay. A couple more questions came in. I know you answered this, but our man from Japan wants to know, should we continue to use this after accomplishing weight loss?
I think I think we do, because once again the environment is so toxic, overwhelmed with advertising, and as I say, the official dogma is low fat, which means high carbohydrate, and so we think people will need, once they reach their stable weight, can go down to 1, but obviously each individual can experiment and see what happens. If you go off of it and suddenly find those scale going up or some other things happening, then you need to go back.
Listen to your body and see what works for you.
Correct.
Good take home. All right, final question. Is there a money-back guarantee? In other words, if you don't lose 500 pounds, am I going to get my money back?
Yeah, we have a return policy for sure.
Okay, that's great. So there's a little risk here, so you guys need to try it. Okay, well, that was the last question. Doc, thank you so much again, and I really think we need to get some of these videos where you can address some of these short some of the ingredients and just kind of like talk to the camera. And we need to talk about that some more. I think this will help with the launch some more. You can post them on Facebook and other social networking sites as well. And I think it will work on your iPad. I think, but we can give it a try.
Oh, as you can see from the picture, I'm too ugly to be on the video.
One of the best-looking 67 or 68-year-olds out there, Doc. Good for you. You're great. All right, Doc, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. And best of luck in the upcoming competition, and also, more importantly, with the pre-launch. I think this is going to help with the launch itself, excuse me. I think this is going to help a lot of people all over the world. All right, folks. Thank you for joining us. God bless. Join us next week for the metabolic syndrome with Stephen Chininsky, biochemist. And it's going to be good. It's going to flow right into what Dr. Lundell was talking about. You all have a great evening. God bless. Good night.